in the morning.
Morning, Meg. Morning, Denise.
Ruby, hey,
Tessa.
come here,
If
baby.
these West Coast people can be here by 10, I don't know.
If I can be here, this East Coast person.
Yeah. All right. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. People will trickle in, I guess. Whew.
Hi, Denise.
Hi, Misha. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
All right. We're on week 5.
So there's another person with a head cold there.
It goes by so quick. So we're at week 5. I'm going to start with David Whyte. I don't think I shared this one yet. I'll be teaching end of life stuff 4 times this week, so it's a little confusing.
Oh, wow.
But I love this quote from David Whyte. It might be my favorite end of life quote. I have a lot of ones that I love. So David Whyte says, the only choice we have as we mature is how we inhabit our vulnerability, how we become larger, more courageous, and more compassionate through our intimacy with disappearance. The only choice we have as we mature is how we inhabit our vulnerability, how we become larger and more courageous and more compassionate through our intimacy with disappearance. So profound. I'm going to read it one more time because folks are still getting here. David Whyte says, the only choice we have as we mature is how we inhabit our vulnerability, how we become larger, more courageous, and more compassionate through our intimacy with disappearance. Morning, Peggy. Morning, Tessa. Morning, Carla. Did anybody play with the chants this last week? Anyone play with a call or? Yeah, Denise, I muted you so you can unmute and share if you'd like. I'd love to hear from you. Sorry I did that, but background noise is. There you go.
Okay, here I am. I really enjoyed that playlist. Megan really it's lovely just the way it is. I went to add one song on it. I just added All Things Must Pass, just the song, not the whole album, but which I finally, it worked for me to do that. But I was wondering, does that change everybody's playlist or just mine?
Yeah, no, it is a public playlist for a certain amount of time. I think Megan said it for like 7 days or something. And during those 7 days, anybody that we shared it with can add to that playlist. And then I think it closes. The YouTube playlist, I set it as anybody can add at any time. So, it might get abused, but if it does, I can go in there and delete things and reset the settings. But yeah, you can add to the YouTube playlist as well.
Yeah, it really was just about perfect the way it was. Because she's got a lot of songs that were.
Yeah.
I hope I don't get tired of it before I need it.
Well, the chants are repetitive because it's like saying the rosary, right? Or it's like it's repetitive because it's a trance-inducing process in our psyches and our body mind. So yeah. Anybody else play with chants last week? Okay. I had a fun little, I don't know if anybody saw the movie Barbie, but there's a really fun little scene that my friend Antanas reminded me about that I thought you might like, and I just put it in the chat. It's where they're at this dance party and they're like, dancing, big dance party. And she's like, does anybody ever think about death? And the whole, like the record scratches, it's like, and everybody like stares at her. It's very cute. Very, very, very cute.
I love that movie.
So I shared a YouTube clip. It's like 4 minutes long where they just play that scene, and I thought you all might like it. So last week we did the financial column in these categories, in these buckets of end of life paperwork. We talked about all these different things, and as usual, there's a lot of stuff for y'all to research, think about, do, from the very simple, like check your beneficiaries, to the more complicated ones of like your financial or your durable power of attorney, your will, or a trust. So we touched a bit on all of those pieces. And I just want to remind you to go ahead, Denise.
Well, seeing that list, I forgot what MOST document is.
Right, that's medical orders of scope of treatment. That's in the first category of paperwork, where we sort of the pink one, where we sort of get redundant about
Yeah.
the kind of treatment.
That's the one we're supposed to get from the hospital.
Yeah, I mean, I did find that one online, and I just can't find the Health and Human Services order page. So you could also call the Department of Health and Human Services and say, hey, I used to be able to order these. Why can't I order this online?
Okay.
Yeah, so just encouraging you to check your, fill out your checklist in the financial section. You have things that you want to do there. And make sure you talk about that stuff with your buddy. Get support from your buddy. Couple of follow-up things. I know that folks wanted to hear about pets, and I just found several articles that talk about some of the things you can do, but you all are familiar enough with these documents to know that you could just write an addendum, right? You could just write a little document that says, here's what I want to happen to my pets should I die, or should my partner and I die, and then talk to the people who might be willing to take them and write them down and put their phone numbers. It's basically like just documenting what you want to create. And if you have a friend who's willing to take them, great. And then if you don't, then some of these articles that I found online give some suggestions for what to do. There's an article from Cake, there's an article from money.com, and there's an article from Trust and Will. And I read them all and I thought they had really good points. But I think it really just depends on your situation. And someone said, maybe it was Susan, like, I'm really nervous about this. Like, I don't want my pet to end up at like the Humane Society, right? So then there's other things that you can do to put in place around that. Okay. One more thing I wanted to do that I meant to do last week that I just want to touch on. We could spend a whole entire 2.5 hours on this, 2 hours on this, which is this really sort of funny meme about like, one day, son, all this will be yours. I'm going to mute you again, Denise. And, can we be kind to our beloveds who we're leaving stuff to, right? Can we be kind? I know folks who've had to take, months or years out of their life to clean up a house from a parent that had been decades long in the making, furniture and paperwork and file cabinets full of stuff. Most of us in the modern world are sort of moving more to digital, but some people have hoarding relatives or, pack rats at least, but I have had people in my life I know that have had hoarding family, and they have to hire agencies and come and clean that stuff out, so can we be mindful, and if we had more time, I actually would love to spend a whole day on this, which is how do we come into the mindset of an ongoing purging of our stuff, right? When we bring something into the house, how do we bring something else out? How do we move into the gift economy? How do we give things away as much as possible? And then I'd love to hear your suggestions about that stuff too. Marie Kondo is a Japanese woman who's gotten quite famous for, does this bring me joy? I'm going to hold the possession in my hands, whether that's a pair of pants or, a knickknack or something in my life. Does this bring me joy? If not, out it goes, and so there's, that's been in a really interesting movement for people. And how do we do it in this life of so much material abundance where we all end up collecting things, and some of us have storage units. And so just a mindfulness about that. My condo link I just put in the chat. Any thoughts about either pets or the practice of purging? Any thoughts about that? Yeah, Misha.
Oh my God, when I saw that meme, I just laughed because that's like my brother and my dad standing in front of the garage right there. And my dad has like hordes of tools and stuff that
Yeah.
whenever my brother comes to visit, he tries to like organize and get rid of. My dad's like, no, don't get rid of that. I need that. He's like, you haven't used this in years. He's like, no, no, no.
Yeah, well, and I have to give a lot of credit, because for land-based people and traditional people and people who lived closer to the earth, they used everything in life. And so that mindset comes
Yeah.
from a more, I would say, more earth-aligned place, that our ancestors sort of came from those traditions. So I don't
Yeah.
want to knock that, but we haven't adjusted, it's sort of like how humans used to feast and famine and feast and famine, and they would sort of adjust, but now all we have is feast constantly, and so we haven't
Yeah.
adjusted, so we have an obesity epidemic, right? So
Yeah.
like it's the same thing. We haven't adjusted, and so we just have crap everywhere, just everywhere. And so, I think, how do we not shame our beloveds or ourselves, but really, get clear about this? Susan, Brenda, and then Carla.
Yeah, I want to say that I went through this exactly same thing with my mother, who lived in rural Oregon, and I was in the San Francisco Bay Area. And when she passed, it took a dozen church ladies over a year to clean her place
Oh,
out.
honey.
Me driving up there every other month for a week and helping them out. And the way we've handled it, my husband and I, in the past, we haven't been able to do that in Washington, but we have giveaway parties.
Yeah.
We just like a potlatch, right? And we just like, I put everything aside that I am ready to get rid of, and then I would just throw a party and have all my friends come over and take stuff. And if there's anything left over, I give it to Goodwill.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much. Giveaway parties and potlatches before you know you're dying. As a regular way of dealing with this. Great. Thank you, Brenda. You're muted, love.
So I started tackling my clothing collection last year, and I did it by, if something I wore and I didn't and I loved it, I'd put it back on the hanger and then turn the hanger around and put it up back on the rack the opposite way. And last winter, at the end of winter, I got rid of 50% of my clothing. And this year, when my winter clothing came out, felt so good.
Yeah, there's a beautiful feeling in it when we purge. We get afraid and then we feel free, right? It's sort of both and. Beautiful.
Yeah,
Thank
but
you.
I touched every item before I donated it. I believe in that.
Yeah, that's a beautiful system. Thank you. Carla.
I'm getting ready to give up my storage unit. I have spent about $8,000 on rent
Oh, honey.
on this storage unit during the last like 8 years. And so I just got back to Tucson from Colorado last night. That's where my storage unit is in Colorado. And I was looking through and the boxes are really well labeled. So I was looking through my stuff. And what grieves me the most is to have to get rid of my art. I collect mostly glassware. And I never get tired of looking at it. So if anybody has any ideas about that, because I know I just don't have room for the art where I'm going to be moving. So
Yeah, when you have more bulky art or you only have so many walls, I have that too. If I hoard anything, it's art. And I don't have enough wall space. I have to rotate things, you know? So I feel you. I feel you. All right, Peggy.
Yeah, it's been interesting because I was just kind of in the process because it's kind of like brought a whole bunch of stuff in. And I realized a couple of years ago that I was holding on to this stuff for the family. And then you realize they didn't really want it. You know, I felt like I was the custodian of it. And so that's been a process, but it's like in the last 6 months or so, I've started really specifically doing it. And it's just been so cathartic. And with this class, it has helped me take it a whole different level. So that's been great for me.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I've done a thing like if I buy something, I have to get rid of 3 other things that are similar, right? If I buy a sweater, 3 other sweaters or 2 other sweaters are leaving. Like I can't accumulate, I have sort of this rule for myself. So systems like that are really helpful. All right, let's take a breath together. Welcome our people. Welcome Karen and Brenda and Peggy and Michael and Linda, who's joined us more recently. All right, we have a choice to make today. Karen, you're here. Karen had to go to the vet this morning, so we thought she might be later than she is. So we have some death. I'm going to tell you my after death options at my story at Earth Haven. It's got slides. It's beautiful. We probably want to process it a little bit afterwards. We want to talk about death options. We want to talk about death paperwork, and we had slated for today psychedelics as well. And the psychedelic conversation, we are not going to record it. So we're going to pause the recording, talk offline. And so we're not going to be able to accomplish all of that today. So I wanted to sort of take a little bit of a vote. Do we want to do these are the 2 choices. Do we want to do the psychedelics today and then not get through some of the other things and push some of the other death stuff, after death option stuff until next week? Or do we want to save the psychedelics to do next week? So raise your hand in some form or another if you want to do the psychedelics today. Okay. Doesn't look like people are. So raise your hand if you want to do it next week. Okay. So that one's winning out. Sorry, Tess. You'll have to show up next week. So we'll go ahead and save it. Little teaser photo for next week. I love this little image.
How many more weeks are we meeting?
Just one more.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So, yeah, Karen and I talked a little bit about how we are structuring that conversation, and it's really about internal preparation. So next week is great. We'll do it then. Great. So I want to take you on a little journey of what it was like doing after death work at Earth Haven. I've already done this talk once this week, but it's so deep, it's so touching, so beautiful. I want to give a little caveat before I start, which is sometimes this can feel like a bit of a high bar for people. And they start to compare themselves like, gosh, I'm not living in community, or I'll never be able to do that. And I just want to warn against that, because my hope in presenting this is it's inspiring and supportive, but not something you have to achieve or accomplish. There's 100 ways to reclaim these traditions and create our own. And most of us are in a 1 step forward, 2 steps forwards, 1 step back kind of situation. And, we had a burst of enthusiasm because of our situation at Earth Haven, but I do want to caution against comparing, and that we can take some of these pieces. So here's the story. This is a photo of Kimchi Rylander, and we are around her body, 5 of us. She knew she was dying 6 or 9 months or so. She had triple negative breast cancer. On my resource page on the website, there's a Facebook link to Positive Deathing with Kimchi, and there's videos and there's all kinds of stuff on there. She really wanted to make her exit an educational opportunity. And we did, we really did. We didn't film it, but it could have been similar to the last Ecstatic Days film because that was her attitude as well. We had a death care team that cared for her from a high level sort of steering committee kind of way, like friends, 5 or 6 of us close friends would meet with her, decide what she wanted, and then she had a little bit of a fund that would pay people to do the actual day-to-day work. We weren't caring for her on the day-to-day for free, but we were sort of guiding what she wanted. Yeah, and this photo is taken inside of the house of another Earth Haven member, my dear friend Martha, who moved out of her house temporarily so that Kimchi could die in her home. Because where Kimchi had been living, there was an outhouse, there wasn't a flush toilet, there wasn't handicapped accessible areas. She had to go up multiple flights of stairs, and Martha had a home on the ground floor with a flush toilet. And so Kimchi, Martha moved out and into another space so Kimchi could die in her home. And talk about, radical ways of being. Most people won't buy a house if somebody's died in it, let alone move out of their house so somebody else could die in it. So real community focus here. This is us tending to her body the day after she died. She died at 8 p.m. the night before. And in the world, bodies are whisked away, right? You're in the hospital and suddenly they're gone and down to the morgue. Or if the person dies at home, the coroner comes, takes away the body, or assesses the body, and then the morgue comes and takes the body. But with home death care, we really were able to extend our love and our relationship with her as she transitioned with all of our beloved dead. And it's really an extended opportunity to say goodbye. It helps us integrate, it helps us grieve. And in many traditions, including the Buddhist tradition, which is where our mentors were from, it helps the person who has passed. We tell stories, we tell them what's happening, we tell them where they are, we tell them what's likely to be happening over the next 3 days. We talk about who's coming. We talk to them basically, much like we would talk to a baby who's just coming in and can't hear. Right? This is what's happening now, because the essence of that being can still hear, according to some traditions. The spirit staying with the body for 72 hours is a Buddhist thing, and then there's 19 days in Tibet, and all these different ways in which the spirit hangs around. So we love doing this process, and it's so beautiful. I'm going to put a little video here from the Sophia Center, which talks about natural death care. It's a little bit of an overview. But we lovingly washed her body and sang to her, told her life story. Her sister was there, so she was able to fill in some of the early years. And then we told her story from when we knew her. It was like a 5-hour ritual. We sprayed rose water, and our mentor Ruth was there telling us how to work with the body and maybe fluids that might be leaking, very simple stuff. Once this part of the ritual was over, we moved her to a public space so that we could host a vigil. And the 72 hours or 3 full days is what we were calling a home vigil. We set up an altar with candles. We have dry ice on the body, or regular ice. Some people use regular, some people use dry ice. Kept the room very cool, and someone stays with the body at all times. We have someone stay overnight. I've stayed overnight. It's a beautiful process. And then visiting hours can happen all day. And in our case, we had a fire burning outside with cedar boughs being burned and sage being burned. So it was a beautiful sort of ritual ceremonial atmosphere. Someone's always tending the candles, and everybody sort of has a role, right? Some people are further away cooking meals. Other people are tending the body, tending the visitors. Other people are tending the fire or the children. So it was a real community effort in many of these deaths. This is a front view of Kimchi laid out in front of the altar, and there's someone there kneeling and being connected. You know, we often don't have real, you know, tactile experience of a dead body. You know, some of us have never been around that, and this is an opportunity to real touch and feel and be with and be near. And it seems important. It seems important if we're going to get death literate. Yeah, I had written here, you know, ritual and ceremony speak the language of the soul, and they cultivate reverence for the mystery. And whatever language you're comfortable with, but there is something important that happens in that space. I also wanted to speak a little bit to oxytocin, which is often called the love hormone. And we know it because it happens at the moment of orgasm. It happens in cuddling. It happens in human to human connection. But what some people don't realize is that it happens in pretty significant amounts during birth and during death. And it happens for everyone in the room. And the concentric circles, people connected to that event who aren't even in the room, right? So you're waiting for a birth, you're hearing about it, you're sort of on the edge of your seat, you hear about the birth, you get the picture, flooded with connection, right? That's a real thing. And so it does really happen in our bodies in the highest amounts during birth, during death, and during orgasm. So, and then that ripples out through everyone involved. So it's a deeply bonding time, especially when we can sort of do it in some of the old ways, which is to put everything else down, to put ordinary reality down for a few days and just really be in that liminal space. There's a lot of gifts that come from that. This is another dear beloved founder of Earth Haven that died. We don't use embalming fluids. We don't use makeup. We just, as I said, use the ice. There's a great website called Crossings Care. I'll share with you also. All of these are on my resource page. They say this really well. They say caring for your own at death means taking some or all of the responsibility for caring for our loved ones at death. This includes emotional and physical involvement. It can mean family and friends joining in a vigil. It can mean keeping the departed ones at home for a transition period, maybe a 3-day transition period, or bringing them home if they've died elsewhere. It means handling some or all of the care of the body. It can be done in conjunction with a funeral director. So, you know, you can do some kind of hybrid where you're like, hey, funeral director, can we use the parlor for the close ones to tend some of the body? I think some funeral homes are starting to get hip to this, especially if they have sort of, if they have women in the director roles. That's starting to happen more and more. It's very rare. It's definitely, the funeral industry is a bit of a good old boys world, but it's changing. So natural death care can include washing, dressing, and transporting our loved ones. Caring for our own means not using invasive procedures on the bodies of our loved ones, and creating an atmosphere conducive to the sacredness of their crossing. So this is only one way to do this. I'm not advocating this necessarily, but it's falling for me in that category of what else is possible. These are some of the things that we've stumbled on. This is an image of a mother and her child in front of an altar with Chuck Marsh's body. Chuck Marsh was also a founder of Earth Haven Eco Village, very well known. And, you know, some people might struggle with that, like a child being around a body. But I think in this case, and many of our minds, you know, if it's done well and it's done with care, that it's healthy for a child to be part of the death process. It normalizes death. It educates about the cycles of life and death. And I think it really can help children, encourage them to have a continued relationship with the person after they're dead, with memories and maybe photos and maybe their own communications. So, you know, this goes into the category of we're pioneering this. And it seems to me that in all earth-based cultures that children had access to this stuff, animals dying, people dying. So we're trying to do it in a healthy way. Lots of preparation goes in when you're trying to do it all yourself. This is in that 3 days of sort of wake or vigil time. This is the grave digging that mostly the men took on. And it's really, it's such an important aspect. And I realized as I was sitting out there, this is a picture of me, I'm sitting out there with them for a while, just watching, listening, engaging, and they built a fire nearby. They had the kids running in and out of the grave, jumping up and down. They were silent a lot of the time, and other times they were chatting or telling jokes, or some grief would come, and it was really beautiful. I really got to see how important moving the physical body to move what's happening and move and integrate the grief and the process is really beautiful. This is our council hall, and when it's time for the funeral, we move the body to a bigger venue and less intimate than we had for the vigil, and so that more folks could gather. We've had hundreds of people show up for funerals, and to sort of come away saying like that was one of the most powerful experiences of my life, because here's the body and here's the stories we're telling, and people are participating, and it's just real. It's just real. And then when we are ready for walking to the gravesite, we cover the body in the shroud. We wrap it in this sacred twine that's usually handmade, cover it with flowers, and prepare it for transport and procession. We have this really great canvas tote, which I'm pretty sure I have a link to on my resource page. We reuse this tote. It's a very sturdy with lots of handles on each side. So and you don't have a big heavy casket with it. So, even smaller framed people can carry this body, because you can add more folks. It doesn't have to be 6 big men doing, the pallbearing piece. People who aren't traditionally as strong can participate in the transport. And this is another procession using the tote. And then when we get to the gravesite, we put the body down, and it's there and it's wrapped, and we found a way to sort of roll the body and move the canvas tote out. We found sort of an elegant way to do that. Here's another beautiful one. I love the contrast of that blue cloth and those beautiful flowers and the soil. Yeah, I had a little note here. Caring for the dead was a central part of life, much like marriage and birth, in traditional villages. So it's part of the fabric, a memorial, memorable experiences that sort of weave the tapestry of our community life. This is a bigger shot of the gravesite there, the body next to it, and then sort of people sitting all around on the hill there. We live in a mountainous area, so everything's hilly. There's a couple of websites, one called Grave Matters, which is really cool, green burial information, and another one called the Green Burial Council. And what green burial refers to is the practice of putting an unembalmed body in a shroud or a biodegradable coffin and then placing them directly in the earth. And we just use shrouds. Here's those 2 links, Green Burial Council and Grave Matters, and their FAQ page, really cool. There's also something called the National Home Funeral Alliance. And, there's rules in every state about whether you can bury a body in your yard or your farm and it's generally more possible than you would imagine. And I am not up on what every state does. And, there's probably changes afoot in all of that as well. So if you wanted to do something in your own yard, you could read up on that in your own state. This is a photo of the family lowering the body into the grave, and then we usually fill the dirt in and decorate it at the end. I have some redundant slides here. Okay. And then I have this little video, and I know the sound didn't work well last time, but this video is embedded into this PowerPoint. So I don't know, we'll try it again. But this is a very short video, like 30 seconds. And it's at Kim Chi's funeral. And Kim Chi died on February 16th, and her birthday was February 20th. So we buried her on her birthday, which was really beautiful and special. And so there's a bunch of young people here shoveling dirt, and she was so beloved. She had so much social capital, as we often say in community, and just so beloved. There was a lot of presence. And she was quite young. She was 56, I think, when she died in 2017. And so if you can hear this video, it's really sweet, and I want to play it for you. Misha, I can see you really well on my screen. Maybe you can give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down if you can hear it.
Happy birthday.
I can see it and hear it now. Well, not anymore. No, I can still see it, but I can't hear it. The sound is kind of going in and out.
Anyway, well, for whatever you were able to see, that's such a
Yeah.
sweet little. Yeah. So I will stop there. And just let you integrate or share any thoughts. We could do maybe just a little breakout here, and just you can talk to each other a little bit about like how that lives in you, how that lands in you, what's new about some of that. That way everybody will get a chance to talk. Let me do breakouts. Okay. How much time? You think that we could do 6 or 8 minutes and it would be enough?
Yeah, that seems sufficient.
Okay, great. I'll do 6 minutes with a 1 minute callback. So so the prompt is just integrate that experience, because a lot of people are like taken aback by all of that. And what's alive for you when you see that slideshow about death and post-death experience? Did you have a question, Susan?
No, I don't.
Okay, great. See you on the other side.
Is
Sorry.
meaningful because I sometimes feel in other family situations or gatherings that I speak and a lead ball falls out of my mouth and nobody picks it up. And I felt so much gratitude that Denise and you all we hold space for each other, and there's no judgment. It really was touched again.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I think that's the nature of being pioneers, is that I think by default we need to be open-minded, even just to be sitting here talking and thinking about all of this. And so I don't think it's a far stretch for us to say, you pioneer in this way, I pioneer in that way. We'll compare notes in the afterlife, Very good, thank you. Anyone else want to share? Misha, you want to share again?
I also I was going to share this with Peggy, but I didn't get to. But I think there might be someone buried on my property here. Out in my backyard, there's a mound that looks like it could be the size of a body, and I never got the true story about it. But I guess there was an old couple that lived here before the house was put on the market, and the story was that the old lady she wasn't there anymore, and the neighbor said, where's your wife? And he's like, oh, she died. And he's like, oh, there was no funeral? She's like, no, we just buried her. So I think she might be buried here on my property.
Yeah,
And
I mean, it's Appalachia,
mhm.
and there's a lot of that a sort of more rural perspective on death. It's possible. Legally, you're supposed to let the deed office know that there's, if you're within, your legal regulations and everything for burial, you're supposed to let the deed office know, and then they put that on.
Ah,
as the
so I
last-
wonder if I could contact the deed office and see if there is indeed a deed.
Yeah, I mean, the way you're telling the story makes me think that that's not a hoop that those folks would have jumped through, but who knows? Who knows? I don't
Right.
know. Because if you can imagine trying to dig up a water line with a backhoe, you don't want to run into a body, right?
Yeah.
That's traumatizing for everyone involved. So that's why it's sort of the location goes on the deed usually.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Meg.
Yeah, I was sharing with my group that I've been part of a few funerals that were very much like the one that you showed with kimchi, so it's pretty familiar. And something that came out, as I love when people listen new things out of us. Like I hadn't said this before or even realized it, but I heard myself saying to my group members that it's so different than like now when I go to a funeral that's in a funeral home and sort of held like professionally by the funeral industrial industry complex. I feel like everyone's standing around like, what do we do with ourselves?
Yes.
Whereas when it's the community doing it together, it's like, oh, somebody needs to take care of the kids. I can do that. Somebody needs to wash these dishes. I can do that. And so the like juxtaposition of like standing around and being like, oh, well, the caterer's handling the food, like the trash needs to be taken out, but that's somebody's job. So what do I do with myself?
I love that. I'm really so glad that you brought that up because really we want to, the biggest thing that's important to most of us in life is contribution. And when we have these things, when we take ownership of these things in community, everybody has a role and then we feel needed and we feel part of it and it weaves the web. Industrial life has made us entertainment, has made so many aspects of our life entertainment rather than a participatory experience. And that's true for food systems and health systems and parenting and all kinds of stuff. But it's really so stark when you speak to it, Meg. And I really love that, feeling a part of it instead of some kind of thing that's being performed, some kind of detached performance. Very good. Thank you. So I'm going to transition us with a quote from Frank Ostaseski. 5 Invitations, Discovering What Death Can Teach Us About Living Fully is Frank's book. He says, we cannot be truly alive without maintaining an awareness of death. Death is not waiting for us at the end of a long road. Death is always with us, in the marrow of every passing moment. She is the secret teacher hiding in plain sight. She helps us to discover what matters most. And the good news is that we don't have to wait until the end of our lives to realize the wisdom that death has to offer. So if you want to learn more about natural death care, it's not very accessible. Not that many people are doing it. This is a course that my colleague and co-founder, Nikki Ann Feinberg, and I founded the School of Integrated Living, which is Earth Haven's nonprofit. Founded it in 2012, a long time ago. But she taught this course in October. And it's home funerals and home burials. And I did not attend it, but Nikki Ann is one of the pillars, she is the center pole of everything that goes on in our community around death. She is the unofficial funeral director. She is such a bright and shining star, that one. And I don't know when and if she's going to teach this again. She's on her own sort of journey right now with a family member who's declining, but you could get on the Soil mailing list or the Earth Haven mailing list, newsletter list, and then you would get updates about this home funeral, home burial course if she's going to do it again. And I just highly recommend it. She is the weaver of the web. That one, she can delegate to everyone around. She can navigate with the family who might be a bit foreign to our tradition. She can weave all the mentors. She's just amazing. So if you get a chance to study with her, I am a big fan. So what are the choices for body? You know, this is where it's going to come back to, what do you want? What do you want? We're going to talk a little bit about traditional burial. I have a bias away from traditional burial just because of what I'm going to tell you. So just know that, take it with a grain of salt. If that's what you choose, that's a very legitimate choice. But I come from this sort of ecological background. So the World Health Organization says about 55.5 million people die worldwide, generally speaking. In the US, the chemicals and materials buried with bodies is pretty staggering. In a conventional burial, like just this, the way we put people in a coffin and put them in the ground, we use 30 million board feet of hardwoods every year, and 2,700 tons of copper and bronze, over 100,000 tons of steel, 1.5 million tons of reinforced concrete, and 827,000 gallons of embalming fluid. So all that stuff goes into the ground. Unfortunately, cremation's not much better. It releases about 500,000 tons of greenhouse gases, pretty significant mercury emissions from all the fillings we all have, our teeth. And about half of the people who die in the US are cremated. So it emits about 500 pounds of carbon dioxide per body. This is a lot. It's a big deal. Green burial is becoming more and more popular. In Western North Carolina, we're so privileged to have Carolina Memorial Sanctuary. But around the country, there are things like conservation burial or green burial grounds. You can look at the Conservation Burial Alliance. I don't seem to have a link right here, but you can just Google Conservation Burial Alliance. They don't allow chemicals. They have minimal grave markers. They encourage biodegradable materials, sometimes even have mandates about it in their bylaw. You know, when you sign a contract, like no coffin, only a shroud. They don't do concrete. They might accept a simple pine coffin or a shroud. It's designed, green burial itself is designed to have minimal environmental impact. And then these conservation burial, talk about, like, you know, we were talking this week about hanging out in cemeteries, but these are like places you can hike, you know, because they're maintained with the natural, local, bioregional flora to be beautiful, right? And to maintain and to conserve that area. And, you know, the characteristics of a green burial, these will vary, but they more or less are on this page. And, you know, this is another one of these hearkening back to pre-industrial. You know, the only reason we have all of this stuff is the industrial system. We, you know, all of us have ancestors that did what Misha's talking about. Our, you know, a family member died. We went out in the back, we dug a hole and put them in it. That's what we did. Yeah, green burials tend to be a little cheaper than traditional burials because you don't need the big expense is in the casket, and you could still pay for the funeral home services. You just do a simpler casket or bring your own or talk about a shroud. Again, this is going to be some negotiation with the you know, an industry that's does its things the way it does its things, but you know, that's what happens when we're pioneers. All right, what else? There's also a lot of options, y'all, a lot of options. There's composting of bodies, really interesting. Recompose is an organization out in Washington, Oregon, and then there's Earth Funeral. Earthfuneral.com is also, I think, out there too, Washington, Oregon. You send the body along, they compost it, they send you back the compost to put in your garden. Very interesting, forward-thinking stuff. There was a TED talk about this mushroom burial suit. that you put it on the deceased, and it's sort of built with this fabric that's infused with the mycorrhizal mycelium mushroom and microorganisms to aid in decomposition. And it's specifically formulated to neutralize toxins found in the body, like, you know, those metals we talked about. So you could look into those sort of burial suits. All of these links are on my resource page. I know that this Capsula Mundi was in process. I don't know if they ever came out with a product, but it's an Italian company that does this egg-shaped container, and it's sort of a pod. And then you get put in it in a fetal position, which is sort of sweet when you think about it. And then you get a tree planted on top. And then if you're going to be composted, they provide these egg-shaped urns that you can also bury. So it's an interesting thing. You know, I cannot keep up with all of the creative stuff that's coming out. It's just outrageous. Like this one, for example, Eternal Reefs. Literally, this is the name of it's eternalreefs.com. They take your cremated ashes and go put them in a living coral reef so that you can be a home for the fishes. It's such an interesting concept, you know, and that they have a business model on it. So they're rebuilding reefs and they're taking your ashes and putting them down there. There's this really cool thing called Aquamation. I would love to do a field trip. If anybody wants to go do a field trip to this place, it's in North Carolina. It's alkaline hydrolysis. They call it, you know, they have all this great language on their website, a gentle, environmentally friendly alternative to fire cremation. And basically what it is like, you know, those murder shows where they dump a body in a barrel full of lye, you know, like where they alkalinize it and then it just disintegrates. That's basically what it is. They call it a water-based process that reduces the remains to dust and ash, and then it's returned to the family. It's called alkaline hydrolysis. Dissolves the soft tissues, leaving bone fragments and metals, but more so it's like cremation, but more environmentally friendly. So they have this place in North Carolina, the Aquamation facility. Very cool. There's also the donation of the body, and it's so to science. Most people are familiar with that. You can give your body to science for the students to work with, right? There are you can do that directly to a university if you have a relationship. There are also brokers that can do that for you. That can take care of all that. You can sign up ahead of time. You have to qualify. I don't fully know what the qualifications are. You may or may not be able to have the body at the funeral. Then there's the donation of body to these body farms. Fascinating place, right? Like there's a bunch of universities, Tennessee, Western Carolina, actually. There's a Houston State, there's an Illinois, Colorado, and South Florida where they're doing body experiments outside with leaving them on the surface, burying them a couple inches, burying them a foot, and like they're studying how bodies decompose. Kind of interesting. It's called a body farm. So lots of options. Let me stop here and see what folks have to say. If you have other options that you know of, I will bring up this thing that Meg brought up to me privately we were chatting by text last week, which is, can I be an organ donor and also do a home funeral? And the short answer is no. And Brenda, I see you shaking your head. You might be able to give more information, and without getting too into the details, which might be a little queasy for some people, they basically open you up to get your organs out, and then, you know, your body's not alive, so it's not healing. And then most people could not deal with that kind of, they sew it back to some extent, but then you're having open cavity. You cannot deal with that at home, really. And so unfortunately, to some people, it's one or the other. Either you're going to be an organ donor or you're going to have a home funeral. So you really have to think about that. And there's paperwork for both, and we're going to talk about that. Brenda, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, you're correct. And I talked with my new natural funeral director, Kristen Howman, and she confirmed that. That you cannot be an organ donor to do the home funeral.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most people are not going to want to, I mean, you know, even those of us who have dealt with bodies and even bodies that had been in accidents, it's pretty at our edge. And we're not going to deal with bodies that have been surgically opened. Like that's way, way beyond whatever we could manage. But something you might be able to negotiate or look into is, hey, I want to be an organ donor and then I want to work with this funeral home, but I want elements of a family participatory, you know, vigil kind of thing. Can I negotiate that with the funeral home? And this is where these hybrid approaches start to come in, where if you find a progressive funeral home that's like, yeah, we gotcha, we're going to need to use some embalming fluid, but we can minimize this, or we can use your simple shroud or casket, or we can, you know, so you might be able to negotiate. And this is where the pioneering comes in. Find a funeral home that's not looking at you askance, that's willing to work with you, that's willing to sort of understand your values. And those have been hard to find, but I think that's probably going to be changing. So that's a way to sort of work with both. Is I'm guessing that the what do you call it? The funeral directors, the folks who work on the body, can handle some walking the middle road there. Meg, did you have your hand up? I saw you, and then I see Misha. Misha, you want to?
I think, sorry, I think that helps me. Basically, like, my mom wants to be an organ donor and my brother, and that they're really adamant about it. And I'm just wondering, like, how do I also bury them on my land, which is also what they want?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's going to take some conversations, and maybe a funeral director that's, you know, going to be an ally for you and your cause, and then like come up with some creative solutions.
Like, the funeral director would receive the body from the hospital in, you know, whatever way they can, and then transfer to us. And maybe we're not actually working with the body. Maybe the body is in a box and like we're just receiving the box and not actually like tending the body at that point.
It depends on which organs. So this is going to get a little bit graphic. So if you are sensitive, you can close your ears. If they harvest anything from the neck up, eyes, other things, then you're not going to be able to see the body. But it might be possible that if the neck up is okay, that you could still do vigil and just care for the neck down, have the funeral director care for the neck down in a way that's going to make it work for that day or a couple days. You might not even be able to get a 3-day vigil out of it, because things are going to really start decaying much faster when you have air circulating inside the cavity.
Right. Yeah. I think I had given up on the idea of a vigil at that point. I was just wondering if I can get an unembalmed body that's had the organs harvested, and then just have permission to receive that and bury them on my land.
You should be able to. There's no special permit that the cemetery has that you wouldn't have access to in your own farm or land. As long as you meet the guidelines of that state, the funeral director can just as easily drive that body over to your land as they can drive it over to the cemetery. That's my understanding, but check with your state. I don't think you're as far off as you might have been hearing. I think you can pull it off.
Okay. The other question is, like, my mom's in Virginia and I'm here. So crossing state lines, like, would they let me take her body?
Gosh, that is a more complicated question. I need to talk to funeral director about that one.
Okay. Thank you.
You probably have to hire them in their hearse to bring the body, I would bet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I did read that states are different, and a person can transport a body, but you need a permit to do so.
Right.
So,
Right, and you need to have a coroner's report, like, I did not kill this person, here's how they died, and, so, but, I want to be mindful of how sustainable this is, because we have to jump through all the hoops, and then we're also trying to grieve our loved one and take care of ourselves and take care of those around us. Like, how many out of the box things do you want to take on, Meg and everyone? Can you take on one out of the box thing, and then hire out for the rest of it, or do everything else in a more traditional way? Because you don't want to stress yourself out because you have some allegiance to some ideal. We'll get there. We'll get there step by step over time, but don't be a martyr about it. Make sure you take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Right. Misha.
So my daughter and I were having a conversation about this the other day, and this wasn't mentioned as one of the options that you were just showing, but like the good old fashioned way of having a funeral prior. They do it in India all the time. That's the way the Vikings did it. And we liked the idea of being able to do something like that on our property. And then when the ashes are, right where the ashes are, after everything's burned, to plant a tree there. And I'm just not sure how.
I swear I heard about someone out in Colorado doing funeral pyres, and like that, I think maybe somebody pinged me recently and I was like, oh my God, I heard about that, but I don't think I have a link. I think if you find something, share it with us, because
Okay.
these folks are pining. Like, how do you get a fire hot enough? That's my question, but I don't know. But that's great. Thank you. Brenda.
Yeah.
I'll just share that I was able to get the paperwork for the natural barrier, and the code is listed on there for Pennsylvania. And you have to have 2 witnesses. And basically it gives my executor the right to determine that my body will not be embalmed and, all this stuff. And then this allows my body to be transported from the hospital to the wherever. I mean, it allows for transport of my body, basically. And you have to have this legal document in order to do that in Pennsylvania. And in the hospitals, when someone dies and they're on life support and they're organ donors, we will actually keep the person on life support after, when they're declared brain dead, for harvesting of organs. And I mean, it could be 1 or 2 days, or 3 days.
Yeah.
But I don't know about I would imagine that even after the organs are removed, that the body could then be transported for natural, because the body is, sewn back up. So, but I think that you just need to find out the paperwork for your state.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in what Brenda just said. And the first thing I will unpack is the reason that they keep bodies on life support is because when they're harvesting those organs, they need them to be living, because they're putting them in other people, right? They're doing a liver transplant, they're doing a retina transplant, they're doing any kind of skin transplant. So they need those things alive. So the person dies, and what she's saying is they stay on life support for up to 3 days, where there's oxygen, they're circulating all the fluids, they're doing all of that in the body to keep those organs living. So that's really just a different perspective than moving into ceremony at that time. So really and they're both valuable. They're both quite valuable. I think you just really need to consider what's true for you. There's some more stuff I want to unpack about what Brenda said, but I first want to go to, will the hospital release an unembalmed body? and let the family transport it? That's another question. Thank you, Meg, and thank you, Brenda. Susan talks about the book Stiff, The Curious Lives of Human Cadavers. And Mary Roach, who wrote the book, suggests a variety of ways one body can be of service post-mortem. Great. And then, yeah, Carla, my dad's ashes were sent through the mail. You know, we don't have as big of a problem with ashes, you know, culturally. They can be shipped through the mail. You can carry them in your car. You don't need a permit. Like it's, you know, it's a dry matter in a way. Where we struggle culturally is with actual flesh and bone dead bodies, you know. Yeah, if you would share that document or the link where you got it, Brenda, I think that might be helpful. We're going to go through an after death document together today, and it's similar. And it's a handmade one with a notarization, and it probably applies to some extent in most states. As far as I know, I don't know how it varies state to state, but I haven't heard of legislation saying that the family can't come get the body. Like that would seem to me a really big violation of our rights. But I don't know if you find that it's true. Here's the challenge. The morgue workers, the employees at the morgue, whether it's the director of the morgue, the assistant director, or just people who are on an hourly, you know, salary at the morgue, they have very rarely, if ever, encountered a family member coming to get a body. What they're familiar with is a funeral director pulling up with their vehicle. They have a relationship with every funeral director in that town or that region. They sign the thing, they have their procedures, the funeral director gets the body. That's what they know. And so when you go to the morgue to get the body, they're confused. And if you don't know what's going on, then everybody's confused. But if you go sort of knowing what's true legally and knowing what's true in your heart, and you go and you say, this is what's happening, this is usually what we do, and the body gets released. I also want to suggest to not stress yourself out at these times and hire a funeral director to go get the body and bring it home. If you want it at your home, you can hire these funeral companies to do certain parts of this. If you want a home funeral, but you don't want to transport, funeral director can make it easy. You pay them, they do it. Super easy. You just do the pieces that you can manage. Does that make sense? And then if your beloved dies at home, then you have lots of options, right? The coroner probably has a system that they use. They come and sign the death certificate, they do whatever, and then they probably say things like, what funeral home are you using? And if you say, I'm not, I'm doing a home funeral, they might ask you a few questions, but it's not their jurisdiction, really. So make sure you educate yourself if you want to do this, and only take on the pieces that feel manageable for you. Other questions, comments about all of this? So add to your checklist some of the things you might want to research in what we talked about. Whether you want to research composting or the mushroom suit, or even just listening to that TED Talk. Just write down on your checklist what you might want to look into. The reef, eternal reef. So great. And you would definitely want, when you decide what you want, you need to make that really clear. And we're going to do this paperwork now, but you also might want to add it to wish, I think it's wish 5. Just make a note either in the booklet or in your addendum of like what your wishes are. If you have a receipt, or if you've purchased a cremation, or if you've purchased a plot in the conservation burial, or if you've purchased a composting thing, which makes it easy, your family's like, oh good, this is purchased. Make sure the receipt is available in your documents. Make sure that they know that this is paid for. So if you've passed and you bought something 10 or 15 years ago, or even 5 months ago, and there's no record of it in your paperwork, your family is not going to know that you bought something already. So make that very, very apparent and tell your power of attorney, tell your executor, tell your family, make that receipt very clear that this cremation service has been purchased. This burial plot has been purchased. Susan.
Yeah, I just have to interject a brief story here. My mother, before she died, she showed me paperwork for that she'd signed up with the Neptune Society. And I saw the paperwork, but then after she passed, I couldn't find it.
Oh.
And and all I knew was that my mother, had shown me paperwork that said Neptune Society, right? So she died at home. The, funeral director got her body, and then I got a call from him like 24 hours later and said, well, we contacted the Neptune Society that your mother said that she was signed up with, and they don't have any record of her. So I was freaking out, and I just tore the house apart, never could find the damn papers that she had shown me, and I had seen them for myself, so I knew she,
Yeah.
wasn't deluded or anything. Well, I was sitting on the floor in despair, and I just said, oh, God, Mom, give me a clue. Just give me a clue. And in the next moment, her personal telephone, booklet, like just detached itself from the wall where it was hanging up pinned to the corkboard and fell to the floor. And there wasn't any wind or anything. It just happened, and I went and looked. I went, So I crawled over to where the booklet had fallen, and I opened it up, and I started looking. I go, I wonder if there's a number in here for the Neptune Society, and surely there was. And I called that number, and somebody answered with a different name, and I said, oh my God, I thought I was calling the Neptune Society. And he said, we used to be called that. But the big Neptune Society, sued to, have its name only applied to them, and we had to change our name. And I said, do you have my mother's name in there? And came back a few minutes later, yes, we do.
Oh.
So, I mean, to be frank with you, if it hadn't turned out like that, I don't know what the hell I would have done.
Right.
Because
Well, you probably would have paid for a different kind of
for
claim.
another, yeah, exactly. I probably would have paid for another service.
And
Exactly.
then if you had found that out later, you would have had a credit for yourself or for somebody else,
Yeah, oh well, that's such good news,
Yeah. Thank you, Susan.
Sure.
Yeah, so I'm gonna talk about the after death forms. And I really, really love this form, the Declaration for Disposition of Physical Body. And I shared the link with you all and suggested that you print it out. And it was created by my mentors at the Center of End of Life Transitions. And it's just one of these things that's a bit of a catch-all. It's a template, again. You may not agree with anything on here, but you can literally take this thing, put it into a Word document, and make it say what you want it to say, because I have it in a Word document. It's on my site. So if anybody is got this up in front of them, Is anybody willing to read a few of these pieces here on the front page? Declaration regarding disposition of physical body after death. Do folks have this from the first week? Peggy, yeah, it'd be great. You're muted, love.
I, after thoughtful deliberation, being of sound mind and more than 21 years of age, and exercise my paramount right to direct the manner of disposal of my physical body after my death, and in order to state clearly my direction, do willfully and voluntarily make this declaration and do hereby declare. First, autopsy is a violation of my spiritual convictions and religious beliefs, and therefore no autopsy shall be performed upon my physical body under any circumstances. Second, after death has taken place, my physical body shall not be embalmed or in any way artificially preserved except by means of refrigeration, air conditioning, ice, or dry ice. Third, for the period of 72 hours after death has taken place, I request name and phone number, take custody of my body, acting as my death care agent, and exercise their right to care for and dispose of my body. If that person is not available for this, then I request that friends or my religious group be allowed to care for and dispose of my body. If this is not possible because of the laws of the state, I request that my family, friends, and acquaintances have access to the presence of my physical body in order to take part in prayer, read spiritual literature, and perform any practices associated with care of the body after death. I require these activities and funeral arrangements be supported by. That's all I can see.
Okay, great.
Fourth is way down there.
Yeah, anybody else wanna have it up and wanna share the next few things? So I can share. The fourth says, I request that my family, friends, and religious group make the following funeral service arrangements. Fifth, no fewer than 72 hours after my death, my physical body shall be buried or cremated. You can circle. My remains shall be disposed of as follows. 6, the directions herein expressed are based upon my deeply held philosophical conviction, religious belief, and spiritual practice. I hereby request blank to guide and support my family and friends as necessary in the fulfillment of these directives. 7, I have made firm and settled commitment while competent to express the directions stated herein, which are of great importance to me. I request that my directions as herein expressed be given precedence and controlling force over other interests by any judge or court or public authority. I request that my relatives and friends respect the directions expressed herein. And then 8th is in declaration. This declaration shall remain in effect unless I revoke it. And then the next page is basically, I understand and I acknowledge, and then the sort of signature and notary section. So you start to have a little bit of a flavor of this document, right? It's got some philosophical understandings that you may not share, but you can, the point of this document is to state what's happening, what you value, what you prioritize, and to write it out very, very clearly so that people know, and then to find someone in your life, could be your healthcare agent that then becomes your death care agent, who's willing to work with this, and be, especially if it's foreign to some other family members, that you have it written down what you hold dear and what you really want. Get the flavor of that document. Any questions about that document? Questions or comments? Brenda?
Thank you so much for that. I put my document in the chat, and this is so much more comprehensive. I'm going to update my document, and the important thing is they usually they go to your next of kin for these kind of issues. So that's why, like, I don't have a next of kin, and so I have a brother that lives out of state, but so it's really important that you put the person in charge of all of this and then the backups, because otherwise they will just pass right over your best friend and go right to the next of kin. But thank you for this document. It's wonderful.
Yes, thank you to the Center of End of Life Transitions for doing this. And you know, these folks are Buddhist, and I imagine come from more traditional backgrounds, and I can imagine it being a struggle with people from different religious or spiritual backgrounds to understand. And so, you know, this is stated in such a way. Now, I do not know if this went to some court where this document existed and then a family member was saying, no, they must be buried or they must be cremated. I don't know what would stand up in court. I haven't had that experience. And it's one of those end of life document things where, you know, you set it in motion because you want it and then you get what you get. But hopefully there's enough open-mindedness and support of what people want so that you can get what you want. But can you imagine if you don't have this document, you die, and then your family members don't know what to do. They don't know what you want. So they're going to go to a funeral home because that's just what they know. That's just what's available. Other thoughts, questions about this particular document, this document declaration regarding the disposition of physical body after death? Any other questions about this? Do you think you might amend this document? Do you feel like you can work with this document?
I have a question about witnesses about this document and other ones too. In the 5 wishes, it actually says the 2 witnesses should be someone that know you personally. And then other times I hear, well, it doesn't matter if, you know, like I think you said you can go to the bank and they just have a couple people there, or somebody else said, well, you can go to the police station and there's a notary, and then they just use whatever people are there and call them witnesses.
Yeah, I would need to look at the 5 wishes. I don't remember them saying you should know the witnesses. In fact, with end of life documentation, it's better to have them to not know them because you run the risk of having conflict of interest in probate.
Yeah.
And we have found that we had something tied up in probate because one of the witnesses was also one of the people that was receiving something from the will, and it just short circuited the fire. Probate
that throws them out.
Nightmare. So I
Right.
would say witnesses just need to be saying that the person signing the document is the same person that's on the ID. That's all that witnesses need to be, and I would err on the side of not knowing them.
Okay. It's on page 10.
Okay, great.
And
Yeah, I don't know what they're
stated.
thinking there, but
Yeah.
I would disagree.
Yeah. Okay, I do too. Okay.
I mean,
Thanks.
I can imagine in some reality that someone might say, this 5 wishes thing is hokey. I don't believe my person signed this. And then the witness can say, well, you know, I'm a friend of theirs. I was there. I can imagine that scenario too. So yeah, I can see maybe why they're doing that. What else? Other questions regarding this form, the declaration regarding disposition of physical body. And what Brenda's saying is she's going to add a piece in here about transport, or she's going to add a piece in here about what she wants. She's going to take this document, she's going to bring it into Word, and she's going to add some things she wants. Do you want to tell us what else you're going to add, Brenda?
Well, I'm gonna put the state, the Pennsylvania 20 PA CSA section 305 code, saying that this is in alignment with the legal statute of Pennsylvania.
Wonderful.
To make it look really official.
Wonderful. Right. And then you'll add in your transportation, you'll add in anything else you care about.
Yeah. And I'm going to specifically put that it could be a personal vehicle also.
Right.
So I don't have to use a natural funeral director's vehicle.
Right.
So that it could be it could be my vehicle. I don't, kind of thing.
Yeah. Good. Thank you. Any other thoughts or questions about this form? Make it your own. Again, it's a template. It's a place to start. It gives you a jumping off point. These belief systems in this document are from my Buddhist mentors, and they feel strongly about them. I'm not advocating this, but it gives you a framework. Okay. I'm going to move on to death certificate. Give me a second because I need to grab my folder. This is completely optional, but I wanted to share what a death certificate looks like with you. It looks just like this form, and I have one here in my hand that I'll stop sharing and show you. It's on a fancy piece of paper, but basically it comes as an 8.5 by 11 regular sheet of paper. Somewhere here. And you'll get it. Hospice will leave one there at the house, or you have one at the hospital, and it's basically a little form that you fill out, and then when you end up taking the form on just regular white paper to the Register of Deeds, what they do is they put it on their copy machine, they shrink it down, and then they stick this green paper in the copy machine, so it just makes copies, and then they stamp it. But you're the one filling out this form, and sometimes they have questions on here that I wouldn't have known the answer to. Like, for example, with Kim Chi, I had access to all her documentation, so I knew her date of birth, I knew her age, I knew her social security number, I knew her address, I knew all of that, I knew her maiden name. What I didn't know is her father's name and her mother's name. And so, what I have done to keep in my paperwork is to fill out some of the more difficult to answer questions on the death certificate, and I just keep it in my folder in case somebody's not around to know those details. I'm not even sure my spouse would know those details, really, because my birth father died when I was 9 months old. He would never know where to find that information, and they won't process this thing if it's not complete, right? This is this bureaucratic craziness that counties have sometimes. So that's just a quick little extra, not necessary, but if you wanted to be very kind to your people after you die, you'd fill some of this out so they know they don't have to go searching for this info. So that's a death certificate. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why I have a copy of my birth certificate with my
Beautiful.
papers,
I love
because
it.
my mom and dad's information is on there.
Yeah, there you go. You could keep a copy of your birth certificate. It's very good. You're so good, Brenda. So good.
Just try and be helpful.
So organized, so organized. All right. So how's everybody doing? A little overwhelmed? Yeah. All right. Well, let me just finish out the slides, and then we can just have a little bit time to talk. So just to summarize, we have now finished, and we could have used twice this amount of time, all 3 categories, all 3 buckets of end-of-life paperwork. We have now done the living healthcare, the advanced directives, the 5 wishes, that whole category, that first column, which is what do I want to happen to me while I'm still alive but can't make decisions for myself. Second column, which is what happens after death. If you want organ donation, you're going to have to seek out that form, put it on your license. We did the disposition of body form. Get a cremation or burial authorization form. That's a redundant form. You can find those for your states also. Let me see if I have a link. Hold on a second. Let me go back here. I have on my resource page a couple of forms for North Carolina that are cremation or burial authorization, and it might not be a bad idea to do that form as well as this disposition of body form, because it may be one of those things where the powers that be look at this disposition of body form as a little woo-woo, and they want the more official form. So you can go to my site and find that more official form, and like redundancy is the name of the game with this end of life paperwork. Is she sure she wanted this? Okay, here's another form. Now we're sure she's sure. Receipts, that certificate. And then we did the last column last week, which was the financial. Okay. All right. Next week, it looks like we're going to do building death community, internal preparation for death, and we're going to do some psychedelics. I did not get to as much internal preparation as I wanted to in this course. And I just want to say that this, I'm now thinking of a 13-week course, which is an awful lot, but I do have a Google survey. If you want to put your date and time in there that you'd like that to happen, right now the leading date and time is Tuesdays from noon to 2, noon to 2:30. That's the time that most people like on the forum. If you want to weigh in about, if you want to participate again and you want to weigh in about the day and the time, I'd love your input. And if you want to recommend it to the registration's not open yet because I haven't clarified the day and time, but if you want to recommend this to your friends or do this with your friends, like I said, I'm going to give you all like half off so you can go through it again. But if you want to recommend family member, please do. They can sign up for a wait list and I can have them on my mailing list. All right, good work today. So next week, again, we're going to be doing how to build death community, a little bit of internal preparation for death, and a focus on psychedelics. We're not going to be recording, and I request that you all don't record either during the psychedelics conversation. It just keeps Karen and I safe. We're talking about stuff that's not really legal in this country. We're going to talk about how to get access to it in other countries. We're going to talk about lots of things, but if you want to be there for that conversation, it won't be recorded. What else? Let me see. I think that is all I have for today. I'm going to read you a quote and then we have 20 minutes to talk. This is from Richard Rudd. To die into the everlasting moment. To do this, your sense of identity and separateness must first die, leaving only life in its place. Once there is no localized center of awareness, there is no death because there is nothing to die. Only consciousness remains, moving from one form to another endlessly. Okay. Do you all want breakout rooms again so you can have smaller group conversations? Or do we want to stay here in the big group? Let's see. Raise your hand if you want small group breakout conversations. Okay, looks like we're staying in the big group. Everybody wants to hear everybody else. Denise, do you have something to share?
I don't have anything in particular. I have been talking to people a lot, and I think I did some. I looked up some things online. The difference, I looked up, there was a little video on the difference between hospice and palliative care, because I didn't really understand the meaning of palliative care. So I learned something there.
What did you learn?
Well, hospice is when you sign up with hospice, you're planning to not ever go back into the hospital. That's the end. That's the end of the life thing. So that's different. Palliative care, they come and they help you with their meds and they do some things, but you might like say you still had like you wanted to go back and do some more chemo or something, and just so sometimes some people still, they're not ready to die, maybe, or maybe they want to live longer for some reason. So then they're in palliative care. So you can still go into the hospital when you're in palliative care. That's the biggest difference.
Yeah.
And hospice, no.
Yeah, right.
There's
So
other differences.
yeah,
Yeah.
beautiful. Thank you. I'm just going to summarize what Denise was saying. Well, what you are only admitted into hospital if you have a terminal end stage condition where you will be dead sometime in the next 6 months to a year, roughly. It varies from county to county and hospice to hospice, but you need to be on a path of dying. You need a diagnosis that you're dying. They won't take you otherwise. Even if you're 99 years old, they won't take you unless you're actively dying. Palliative care is more of an umbrella term. It's used for people who are dying, people who aren't dying. It's about how to manage pain. And they work closely with end stage. They work closely with hospice. In some cases, they work closely with end stage situations, but it's not mutually exclusive. They also work with folks who are going to live a good long time. Very good. Thank you, Denise. Susan. Oh, Karen. Karen's first.
Yeah, I just wanted to share that I've been putting together my death team, and I was talking to my daughter, and all my friends are usually as old or older than me that I was mentioning. And she said, you know, how about so-and-so who's a young friend? And she said, Mom, we need some young people that aren't going to die before you. So I was talking with my very dear friend, Jenna, who's just 33, and I was mentioning it, and we got to if she would like to be on my death team, and she immediately said yes. And we just let that go. We went to dinner a couple of nights later, and she was a little teary-eyed, and she said, I want to tell you what an honor it is for me to be invited into this process and to be invited to be with you when you die and to support your daughters and to be of help in any way that I can. And it just, even now, I'm quite touched by that. And what I realized also is that for some reason, I sort of had it in my mind that my dying is a burden somehow. And so having this experience reminded me that it's not a burden to ask someone to walk that path with me. And, you know, remembering that even in my life, I'm not a burden. So it was lovely and wonderful.
Oh, what a celebration. Thank you. We can all savor that and take that in. Yeah, death is the last big contribution we will make. It is the last big contribution we will make. And it is a tremendous contribution. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And most people, when they get asked if they would be part of a team or, you know, have a role at the end of life, they do feel that way. They feel very honored. Yeah. Susan, I saw your hand before Brenda's. Do you still want to speak?
No, I want to sit with that thought. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's the last big contribution we'll make. So how do we want to make it? You know, part of the reason that we are all here having this experience together is because people have pioneered death in ways that we can learn from. And it inspired me, and now it's inspiring you. This is the legacy of their contribution. And, you know, when we can really move, when we can walk towards death, the more we can walk towards death, the bigger the contribution our death is, really. Very impactful. Thank you. Brenda. You're muted, love.
I keep lowering my hand and then I forget to unmute. But yeah, thank you, Karen, for that beautiful share. I also have a couple of young people on my death care team, and that I hope can be with me in my room. On a more practical note, you know, I appreciate everyone thinking I'm so organized, but I have 6 accounts in 2 banks. None of them have beneficiaries, and this afternoon I will be taking care of that. I'm just putting that out there. I'm like, I had no idea. They don't even mention that when you open an account, which, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, oh, you know, a way, or can I just tell you a little workaround, because I'm not as organized as I want you all to be either. And I was thinking recently, like, oh, if my partner has access to my phone and can get into my phone, which he already knows how to do, he can get everything, right? He can do the things. And so I don't want to leave it that way, but it's a stopgap, right? Misha.
You were just mentioning something about walking towards death. Do you do another class or something that's called Walking Towards a Good Death?
Yeah, so
Who does that?
yeah, I can show you the slide of this.
Okay.
My friend Mary Lane and I did this course, maybe, I don't know, maybe we did it 3 or 4 times, and it's got the old date on here. We're not planning on doing it again in the future, but there is a recording you can purchase on my website, and it does go quite in depth around the internal preparation for death. And we have these 4 pillars that we work with, and it's I'm going to review them next week, so I'm not going to go into them right now, but I will review them with you.
Cool.
And you can have access to that audio recording on my website. And I'm quite certain you can get a lot of the transmission of that, because those experiences were that class. I don't know, like I just put out a little life update, and like there's something that happened in that class that remade me. And I think it's partly Mary's energy and transmission. I think it was partly the 2 of us working together, but like something really big was coming through that work. And it really changed me, you know, this idea of these qualities that I want to cultivate within myself as my internal preparation. So I'm going to share those with you next week. But I'm pretty sure you can get some good stuff out of that audio recording. Yeah. And I'll put the link in the chat right now. Great. And it's a meditative journey, you know, it's less information and it's more contemplative and mystical. And so each week is a different characteristic. We'll talk about them next week. And they are profound, really profound. You know, like I'll just share one, which is receiving. Like, in order to walk towards death and in order to have a good death, we need to learn to receive. And it's counter to many of, you know, counterintuitive, and it's absolutely true. We absolutely need to learn to receive. And if we're going to be really good at receiving and really good at receiving death, we have to start learning to receive.
Can I just say something to that?
That's vulnerable. Yeah.
Yeah. That's one of the things that I teach, when I work with my clients, that the very first session, if they ever come to me, is just about them learning how to receive, because you know, we're not taught how to learn how to receive. It's like growing up in this culture, it's like give and take, give and take. Well, what about receive? What about receiving the gift that the giver is giving?
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
and just really allowing yourself to take that into every cell in your being. And a lot of people are just like blown away by that. They're like, yeah, I've never really thought about really, you know, just receiving.
Yeah.
I feel like I have to give something back in return. I'm like, no.
Yeah, I mean, Misha, you and I both are in the tantric realms, and
Yeah.
you know, the way that we learn how to run the most ecstasy in our bodies is through receiving.
Yes.
And you know this more than most. And so this is true if we want an ecstatic death. We need to learn to run ecstasy in our bodies, which means we need to learn to receive.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's paradoxical, and that 4-week journey of walking towards a good death, it starts with pillars, and it works up to the idea of receiving. And receiving is the mother of all internal preparation. Receiving is the foundation of all internal preparation. True receiving, receiving this life, receiving this body, receiving this incarnation. It's the work of a lifetime. Yeah, I see Brenda and then I see Meg.
I'd like to thank you for putting that Walking Towards a Good Death opportunity out there. I've actually scheduled a kind of a personal retreat weekend in May at my friend's place near the woods and near a stream. And I'm going to be journaling through that. And my wisdom mentor, who's helping me with some of my internal end of life work, is going to be reviewing some of that after that weekend with me. So I'm actually going to turn it into a personal retreat weekend.
That's
So
so
thank you.
sweet. That's so sweet. It really is. The transmission, I think you'll experience it. The transmission, I just even feel it in my body right now saying it. Like something really powerful came through that transmission. And it's you know, I haven't yet been able personally to like take that internally and figure out, you know, I keep envisioning this mystery school, you know, this sort of life, death, mystic mystery school of like, how do we internally prepare? And it's that work that is the seed of that. And I haven't yet even been able to mature fully around it to be able to offer it to the world because that transmission is so powerful. And I, you know, I just like want to do it in person and I, you know, it's just all of the details, but thank you for getting it, Brenda, to the point where you're like, okay, I'm going on retreat to do this, because that's really the caliber of that work. Thank you, Megan, and then Michael.
Yeah, I wanted to share a practice. It's a really simple practice that a dear friend and teacher offered to me, which is whenever you think about breathing, to receive a breath instead of taking a breath, or instead of like the active verb of breathing, to frame it as receiving a breath.
Oh, I love that so much. It's so yin. Yeah, our culture is so yang, which is like, we're breathing, right? And this is such a yin practice of like, oh, let me receive from this existence. Thank you. Michael.
I think we're talking about where we're at this moment in this course, and then I really want to share that all this talking about preparing for dying and transition, something is happening to me at a speeded up process of living. And I had my private session with Lee, and it's like, oh my God, I am outing some deep belief systems that were limiting my life and my in receiving joy and participating fully in life. And this, it's like I am doing this balancing of thinking and focusing on death and transition and dying and life and love. And I call it filling in pieces of my puzzle that I don't care if I'm 69 and I should have done it when I was 18, but it was a very dark time then. And then to see what traumas, and it's all coming up, and I'm able to face it and to release it and rewrite at a much easier level now that I also am getting so comfortable with talking about my transition. So I don't know if it's happening to anyone else here. This it feels like timeless, ageless, rejuvenating. It's now or never kind of feeling, and it's now. It's definitely not never. So just wanted to share that.
I don't think you're alone. I think you're just super good at articulating it. And, you know, I think this is one of your superpowers, is articulating the subtle. And I think we're all going through a portal being in this class together, and how it shows up in each person's life. But this is the extra special blessing of contemplating death is that life becomes vivid. It's just the byproduct. It's just what happens. Life becomes technicolor. It's like the Wizard of Oz going from black and white to technicolor. Suddenly you're like, whoa, I'm in a whole new world. So, yes, bravo. Anybody want to speak that we haven't heard from today? Carla or Tessa or Peggy or Linda? Anybody want to share anything these last few minutes here? Peggy.
You know what Michael just said, it just is kind of coalescing some things that I've been just kind of out here. And it's kind of like, let's just put them all together and look at them in one big ball together. So thank you, Michael.
Yeah, Michael's the poet. Michael's the bard. You're the bard. Whoa! Carla, please.
Well, I too am kind of weaving together what Michael shared and what Karen shared. I too have a nomadic lifestyle because my daughter-in-law is Norwegian, and she and my American son are getting ready to move to Norway with their baby. But I don't have as much courage as Michael has. And also, what you shared, Karen, about feeling like I don't want to burden people. That is huge for me. And I'm so critical of my mother because she won't reach out to ask for support, and because she feels like a burden to people. So I know that I'm projecting a lot, onto my mother. I want her to accept support when I'm having trouble doing it myself. So thank you.
Oh yeah.
I'm going to be taking a day-long retreat on Leap Day, February 29th. I do this every 4 years. I do exactly what I want to do with this extra day. That's a gift.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's such a beautiful gift to share. I love how you wove together the themes of, working through lineage trauma and patterns and imprinting that we have from our parents and our culture, and how to sort of move through that towards what we think we really want. And then I love how you took responsibility for what I'm seeing my mother do and feel critical of, I'm also doing, right? And along the lines of, how do I receive? How do I receive? So really vulnerable, beautiful themes there, Carla. I feel you just gifted me significantly, and probably others, with that share. Thank you. All right, we are at our end today, and as usual, I will stay on for another 10 or 15 minutes if folks want to gather and chat and debrief and hang out. And if you need to go, please go. You are loved and blessed, and we will see you next week.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye,
Yeah.
Susan.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Have a blessed day.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Carla,
everyone.
Carla, I just wanted to say that I saw you smiling when I was talking, and I was like, I hope Carla's going to share what she's smiling about. And then you said you don't have as much courage. I heard you say that you don't have as much courage as Michael, but I just want you to know that recognizing what you think is a lack is actually a recognition of what you have. And I could tell by the smile that you have it. You just some belief system like your mama, I don't know. But I don't know if it's Norway, and then you said leap. It's like, go girl, go, leap to your heart's desires. It's now or never. And I just felt all of that in your smile, and then you spoke it. So I wanted to share that and reflect it back to you.
Yeah, that was a good double whammy from the two of you. Good bookends for inspiration and tears. Linda,
Thank you.
Linda, do you want to chime in at all? You've been quiet today. She's flickering. You're on mute still, sweetheart. You gotta turn your microphone on. There you go.
No, I'm just digesting, slowly integrating, lots to think about,
Yeah.
and very appreciative of all the sharing. And so I guess I'll go back to the concept of receiving. And I find that a contrast to the focus on reciprocating. So I'm playing around with that also, because the other concepts that I've been working with is there's been a focus in lots of the mainstream circles to do gratitude, thankfulness, gratefulness. And along with that, some of my Indigenous friends have said, gratitude also requires reciprocity. So now you've thrown in the whole idea of receiving, and I'm sort of balancing that whole thing of, yeah, it's both. And I say that partially because I had a friend recently say to me, don't send me birthday cards. Don't let anybody know I have a birthday, because all that does is obligates me to respond. And I responded to her by saying, that assumes that you haven't already contributed and haven't already given. Okay. And so if I was to send you a birthday card, it would be to reciprocate, to thank you for what you've already given. So anyway, this question of receiving and reciprocity and gratefulness, I got to keep messing with for a while. Thank you again today for all your sharing, and for the past weeks also. Thank you for all of you.
Yeah. Yeah, those are rich themes that you bring up. And there's a great link to a series called Grief and Praise by a man named Martin Prechtel, who's Indigenous, or at least Indigenous raised. And he talks a lot about how grief is praise, but when we've lost something, right, it's really a thank you. Grief is the ultimate form of gratitude, and you can't have gratitude without grief, and you can't have grief without gratitude. They're embedded. They're the yin yang symbol. So I love what you're saying there. And then how does reciprocity come into that? Giving and receiving. Yeah, really good contemplations. Thank you. Yeah, Carla, did you have something else to add?
I just had a question because I was so absorbed in what Karen had shared. I missed what you said. Are you going to offer that Walking Towards a Good Death class again? I think Linda, you've taken that, right? Are you going to offer it again, or did you say it's available to purchase the
It's
recording?
available by audio. And we don't have plans to offer it again. It felt like it was a chapter and we worked together so beautifully. And then I sort of like headed in a different direction. And so no, we don't plan to offer it again, but I'm trying to do something with that internal preparation work and maybe do something else. But you can order the audios on my site. Yeah, that's the short answer. It's such a big process for me. Like when you ask me, I just like go so internal, because like there's just this whole body of work that's emerging from it that hasn't really, it's just still in seed stage. So yeah.
I did take the class, found it very good. I will just say one insight that jumps out at me is, instead of thinking the opposite, the balance to fear is trust, you made the point of perhaps the balance to fear is learning how to receive joy and beauty more. And that has really stuck with me. So yeah, I wanted to say that I enjoyed that. Also, I think it's Mary Lane who has just recently come out with a book on plant medicine.
Yeah.
Is that her
Yeah.
authorship?
Yep.
Conscious Death and Dying.
Yeah,
Would you
she did
recommend that?
Yeah, she did a project for the Center for Conscious Living and Dying where she did plant medicines, and it's from, I haven't looked at the book, but I don't think it's psychedelics. It's more like, plants you can have in your herb garden that assist, that have, energetic and healing properties. So it's not a psychedelics book. It's a regular plant spirit book. But yes, I would, anything Mary does, I would recommend. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah. Peggy, do you have anything you wanted to share?
Yeah, mine is more logistics, because I'm just wondering, because I haven't gone back and looked at everything. Is there like a checklist that's like, here's some things we've covered? Because it's kind of like, this is my stuff from today, okay? So it's kind of like I have emotions, there's facts, and then I have thoughts and emotions that go along with that. So I'm fixing to go to an attorney to get, all my stuff set. And so I need the facts, but I want, you know what I'm saying? I just want to be able to say, here's the facts and here's how I'm thinking about the facts.
Yeah, I really love that. Yeah, that we're weaving in our internal process and our external process. I don't have something like that. I mean, the slides, you could pull up the PDF of the slides and remind yourself of what we did each week is a way to do it, and then sort of make some notes. I don't know the answer to that conundrum of how do we do our external and our internal process all at the same time. It's a lot. It's just a lot. And we really need a lot more integration than what we've been getting here. And so then I keep wanting to expand the course. And then I'm like, oh my God, it's going to be too big and too long. People aren't going to want to do that many weeks. And so I'm sort of torn with how to frame it all, and hoping to get some input from y'all next week.
So on the PDF, it has basically all of the things that we've covered. Does it have like sub areas in those?
Basically, it's
like the healthcare advocates.
It's a PDF of the PowerPoint slideshow, so it will ping you. It will remind you of what we did each time, but then you're going to have to go to the resource page and get the actual links.
Okay.
I would like to suggest something to think about for the next week that might help address this. Is the resources among the participants in this class are just amazing.
Yeah.
And I would like to see if we could continue to meet as a group, maybe a couple times a month. You wouldn't have to be involved, Lee. I'm just talking about. It seems like we just have so much
I think
depth and wisdom.
That's a fabulous idea. If someone were willing to organize that and send a link, I bet you people would show up for a while. I think that's because everyone's bonded now, because this conversation bonds people.
Right.
I love it. I love that idea. Why don't you hit reply all in the email and sort of suggest it, and then we can maybe talk about that next week also.
Okay, so we do have you did include people's email addresses a couple weeks ago. Okay, great. Thank you. I need to go now because I'm getting ready for a meditation retreat in the Catalina foothills. So.
Beautiful. Enjoy yourself, love.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Good to see everybody.
See you next week.